All right, welcome to step two, where we're going to be talking about choosing your metrics for success. So, in order to determine the measurements and the metrics that are meaningful and relevant to your specific farm and context, you'll want to consider some of the following things. The unique context that you've defined right now is going to help you along this journey of defining these metrics and measurements. From here, we're going to get more specific about what it is you should be measuring and tracking in order to gauge whether or not you're getting closer or further away to your quality of life. In creating your context, you've gone into detail about what are your resources and your limitations, what quality of life you're actually pursuing, and what you need to produce or to acquire in order to sustain the quality of life that you're aiming for. From here, we need to get a little more specific by determining what indicators will inform you definitively on your progress. So let's go through a couple of examples. Let's say you've got a livestock operation. What resources on your farm are necessary to be present and functioning for your production to be reliable, abundant, and of high quality? So a rancher, when looking at indicators in their operation, might look at pasture health and forage access. You might be looking at your animal's body condition, which will give you indications on weight gain and perhaps muscle mass or other indicators. Feed conversion rates will tell you how efficiently the feed that you're giving them is converting into either weight gain or the products that they produce. Similarly, with fertility rates, fertility is a great indicator of the health of your animals, as is susceptibility to disease, and also what types of disease can give you indications about where you might need to improve your management for their health. Hanging weight at harvest is obviously a measurement of the end product, as is average egg, milk, wool production, depending on the animals that you have and what you are farming for. For a grain producer, it might be the weed pressure during a growing season, or the amount of moisture in the soil for germination when seeding. Similarly, you might be looking at growth rates or Brix readings, which is a measurement of the efficacy of photosynthesis. The end product, of course, is your yield, and whether you're measuring that in bushels or units of weight depends on the type of crop that you're growing. Pest vulnerability can also tell you a lot about the health of the plant based on the immunoresponse that they have. And weed pressure similarly can give you indications on the health of your soil. Now, there is a lot of overlap in different types of crops, but tree and perennial crops might be something that you focus on the fruit set or the fruit size and the quality. The tree or the shrub health and growth rate. Sometimes plant health can be observed by the coloration and the glossiness of the leaves, or the trichomes and the little hairs along the stems. Now, though there's a lot of overlap in different types of crops and plant health, tree and perennial crops might be something that you look at for fruit set or fruit size and quality. The tree or the shrub health and the growth rate is another indication of health. Irrigation needs can closely relate to the overhead that you have for watering. Bud set in the fall can be an indication for how well fruit set will be in the next year. And pest pressure can also give you a lot of insights into the health of the plant. Similarly, for horticulture operations, you might be looking at growth rate, pest pressure and damage, aesthetic quality, especially depending on the market that you are selling to. Different aesthetic qualities such as uniformity, size, coloration, and lack of blemishes might be necessary for the market that you're selling to. Brix levels could work as a proxy for nutrient density. Size and uniformity similarly could have to do with packaging considerations. Beyond individual enterprises, business health is the most standard of all of the health categories, especially since businesses primarily exist to make money and to invest capital. You might be looking at your sales, your net profit, which of course is the revenue or the income that you generate minus the overhead or the expenses of the business. Assets and liabilities are a measurement of debt or profitability of an enterprise and can give you a valuation of your business. Employee retention and satisfaction is a really big one, especially for those of you with larger operations who are managing a lot of people. Growth projections can tell you if you are on track to where it is you're trying to go with your business goals. Customer satisfaction can be a very important indicator as to the relationship that you are cultivating with the people who buy your goods. And things like reduced spending and overheads can also have a lot to do with the contribution towards your net profit. Now, human community health, in my opinion, is one of the most overlooked aspects of a holistic view of the health of a farm. This covers the full range of factors that affect our personal health and our relationships that we engage in. It's also highly subjective. Chances are that you're going to value and even define human community health in a range of different ways. Personal health could mean something very different to different people. For you, this might mean your levels of energy and activity throughout the day. Maybe it could be a freedom of injury or pain. Maybe for you, you're measuring it as your weight or your body mass index. It's different for everybody. Family connections and relationships are relevant and important to just about everybody. But again, how you measure this or what aspects of these are important to you are going to be different as well. Maybe this is spending more quality time with your spouse or with your children. Maybe it's dedicating quality time to spend with your parents or your grandparents. Now, a sense of security and safety also is quite relevant to most of the people that I talk to. But again, how you experience this could be very different. Community connection and reliability is also universally relevant. This might be engaging in events, taking part in local politics, knowing that you can count on neighbors for assistance if you need it. Or maybe it's just having friends nearby that you know you can count on. Personal fulfillment and reaching your potential is one that I really like to include here because most of us have a unique sense of this as well. This might be the challenges that are present in your work that help to push you to learn more and improve your skills. Maybe there are concrete goals on your farm or in other aspects of your business that you personally want to reach and give you a sense of satisfaction as well. However you define your human community health, I really encourage you to make sure that this is a part of the overall health of your farm that you look into and not ignore, because it has such a potential to make or break the quality of life that you experience through your operation. So I'll give you a bit of an example from my own farm. Now, not all farm goals are directly connected to the health of the land or the finances of the business, though these are often the easiest ones to measure. And I would imagine that most of you have goals that you wrote down through the context creation exercise that are connected to a feeling of health and well-being that are uniquely defined by you. In the case of my own farm here, I've taken a lot of time with my partner Alba to decide on what is really important for us and how the farm could be a reflection of our priorities in our personal life. For example, food security for our family and for our small town is really important to us. Now, it's not a huge goal because we have a really small town. I think in the last census, it was a little bit over 60 people. But we also have a fairly small land base compared to a lot of other farms, and so I think these goals might match each other. Though we're not set up for production yet, I know one of the things that I'll be measuring in the future is what percentage of the residents of our town buy products from our farm. As I start to get an insight into these numbers, I'll probably add more details to those metrics. Maybe in the future, I'll have conversations or put out questionnaires to the people who buy from us as to what percentage of their fresh produce comes from our farm directly. We're also really passionate about increasing the health and the capacity for life on the land that we manage. This goes beyond the actual farm engagement itself and goes into caring for the river and the riparian area around it, which supports a lot of wildlife, as well as the health of the hydrology of the land around us. I also care a whole lot about contributing to the resilience and the quality of the crops and the animals in our changing climatic conditions. For this reason, one of the primary enterprises that's getting us started and which is already underway for me is the tree nursery. And beyond just propagating trees and shrubs that produce food, I'm also genetically selecting them for those that do well under the harsh summers and the prolonged droughts, which are becoming increasingly common in our region. As I learn more, I also hope to do this through breeding projects with farm livestock. I really believe that there is an untapped potential in the biodiversity that's available not only in cultivars, but also in breeds of livestock to adapt to the changing conditions here and to do better in things like feed conversion and natural forage so that we can reduce the inputs that are required to keep them healthy and productive. So that's just an example from my farm. Let's look into a hypothetical one that we can use to break down possible metrics for measurement. So I'm going to call this example Mediterranean Ranch. So let's go into the hypothetical context of Mediterranean Ranch. So the team on this ranch has stated that in their vision of a high quality life on their farm, their cattle receive all the food and nutrition that they need for the whole year only from the pastures on their land. The future resource base that they believe that they need to achieve this is diverse and healthy pastures growing in deep, rich soil. The ranch is located in the Mediterranean climate, where hot, dry summers cause the pasture to dry up, leaving the cattle without quality feed in the summer. The farmer knows that compacted soils absorb and infiltrate water poorly, causing it to dry out more quickly in the dry season. Together, the team decides that decompacting the soil in their pastures is going to be a priority. So, what could this team choose as a metric for measurement to see if they're moving closer to the goal of their quality of life statement? Let's look at some of the options. In one case, they could start to track the amount that they spend on cattle feed per head of cattle in the summertime, when it's likely to be dry and unproductive. Another one could be the compaction level of their soil. Another option could be the amount of grass per 100 square meters at different parts of their pastures in the summer. And another option could be the infiltration rate of water at different places in their pasture. Which one of these options would you choose? Which indicator do you think is most related to the goal that they are trying to achieve? I'm not going to give you a concrete answer here. The idea is that this is open for discussion, and some of the criteria that we're going to look at in these next slides might give you more insight as to which one you might choose in their circumstances. So it's also important to consider the cost and the complexity of different types of measurement and monitoring. You should consider the tools, the knowledge, and the cost of certain tests and measurements. Expensive equipment, expert analysis, and lab tests can give very specific information that's hard or impossible to get from any other method, but all of these come at a cost. The question I would pose to you is, could you look for another indicator with simple tools and easy observations that cost you little and give you the information that you need in order to make effective decisions? In my opinion, it's always best to start with the easiest and most cost-effective indicator before you start going into more specific and costly ones where you really need certain information, especially if those simpler and cheaper methods can give you what you need in order to make those decisions. My personal recommendation here is to always start with the simplest and cheapest measurements or observations that you can to see if this gives you the information that you need to make effective decisions. And only from that point of understanding should you go deeper into the more costly or more difficult or more complex methods of analysis, if that's what you need in order to go deeper into your own research and study in order to make the decisions that you need. Some other questions to consider when deciding on which metrics to choose are, when will it be most effective to make your tests and measurements? If you are getting the information but at the wrong time, either way too early or too late in order for it to affect your decision making, it's probably not going to be the best time for you to collect that information. Most metrics are time sensitive. It's important to know what minerals and nutrients are in your soil before making a soil amendment and management plan, and usually before planting as well. It's also essential to conduct the same tests in the same places after your management plan has been completed so that you can actually see what effect it has had based on the same measurements. Some lab tests, for example, sap analysis, are most useful at key development stages in the plant's growth, and you need very quick results to be able to take responsive action to the findings from the tests. It's really important for you to plan ahead for these tests and measurements to be made in order to avoid missing the window in which the information that you gained is useful to you. Now, hopefully these different considerations and criteria have helped you to narrow down a few options. So let's stress test some of those options to see if we can get even closer to the metrics that are most valuable to your decision making. Here's another question to consider. Would it be possible to improve in that aspect that you're hoping to improve in without seeing a change or even diminishing in the indication that you chose? Let's go back to the Mediterranean ranch, where their goal is to feed their cattle on their pastures throughout the entire year. The difficulty in their plan is having fresh and high quality forage in the summer months when there is little rainfall to keep their cattle healthy throughout that period. Let's say they decided to check the compaction level of the soil in their pasture. Would it be possible for them to see no change or even worse compaction rates in that soil and still achieve their goal of feeding those animals throughout the summer? Do those things necessarily correlate to the goal that they are trying to achieve? Here's another question. Is the metric that you have selected the earliest indicator that things are improving or diminishing? An example could be an olive producer who is concerned about the damage of the olive fly on the quality of their final product. If they decide to measure the damage from the olive fly just before harvest, is that the correct time to look at that? Would it be more effective for them to put out traps for the olive fly earlier in the season to establish whether there is a risk of having damage from that pest earlier in the season or just before harvest when there's little that they could do about it? Another question would be, is the indicator that you've chosen dependent on other indicators to create a complete picture? Let's go back to the example from the Mediterranean ranch. If they're looking only at the compaction rate of their soil, is that enough to tell them about the quality and the abundance of the forage that's available to their cattle? Would they also need to look at the quality and the quantity of the forage within a certain area and see how it correlates to the compaction of the soil underneath in order to get a more complete picture? Or would the compaction rate alone give them the information that they need? And lastly, would it be possible to influence that indicator to create false data that isn't helpful? How could you prevent that kind of manipulation? So let's say the indicator that you have been told to monitor is carbon sequestration in your soil. Let's just pretend that this is important to somebody. Would it be possible to manipulate the data about the amount of carbon that has been sequestered into your soil in order to get a positive reading and, let's say, a carbon credit payout, but actually not have any real effect on the health of the ecosystem that you're managing? If so, how could you prevent the corruption of that information so that you actually get something useful that can tell you whether or not you are making progress in the overall health of the land that you manage? So though we'll go into this aspect of the topic a little bit more in the next steps, it's also important to consider how you're going to organize and review the data that you're collecting. How are you going to organize and review these results? Any metric or measurement is really only a snapshot in the long timeline of the living dynamic management of your farm. The real utility in gathering all of this information is in being able to accurately analyze changes over time and with different management strategies. This will give you insights not only into the efficacy of the strategy that you're implementing, but also how uncontrollable variables such as weather interact with and affect your management. For example, a rainy year might produce very different results under the same management as a drought year. The price of equipment and inputs can fluctuate a lot, making the previous soil amendment strategy maybe financially unfeasible with the new prices. With so many different changes happening outside of our influence, only consistent measurement and observation can give us the accurate feedback that we need in order to create anti-fragile management strategies and adapt in appropriate and timely ways. This is exactly why we look at health on the farm from the three category perspective. As I know that all of you are very aware of, it's possible to be very successful in one or more area of a farm and be struggling in others. You might be very successful financially, but you observe the health of your soil is declining and requires more inputs and water every year. Maybe your soil health could be improving and your crops becoming healthier and more reliable each season, but in your focus on the health of your crops and your soil, you're working endlessly and it's affecting your health and your relationship with your family. Almost all of us feel out of balance in some way, but hopefully not everything is going wrong at once. And it's very rare on the flip side to have everything working perfectly at the same time either. But balance is essential for having a high quality life. What good is having high profits if you're unhealthy and can't enjoy them? A high functioning farm ecosystem and great yields are still stressful if you're making little money from them and are struggling to pay the bills. This is exactly why we track ecological health, financial or economic health, and human community health. We need to look at multiple categories when we're tracking how things are going and whether or not we're getting closer or further away from the quality of life that we want. Now, through this program, I've asserted 3 different metrics in each one of these categories that I believe are universally relevant to all the different types of enterprises on farms and that can give you important insights onto the health of your operation, regardless of what your cultivars or what your business model looks like. By measuring these baseline metrics, you can get a good starting point from which to gauge progress in the future. For ecological health, I would suggest soil water infiltration through an infiltration or a percolation test. The instructions on how to do all of these are on the Farm Health Report Card digital tool. Soil compaction is also closely correlated to things like productivity of the land. And doing a slate test, which is a measurement of wet aggregate stability, can also be very relevant in determining the health of your soil. The economic metrics are not unique to farm businesses, but businesses in general. Things like cash flow statements, profit and loss statements, and assets and liability evaluation all give you valuable insights into the health of your business. And if you don't know where to start in measuring your human community health, my suggestions would be personal health metrics, farm community health, and larger community health score. Each one of these is connected to a short questionnaire that I suggest you fill out maybe once a month or once a quarter in order to keep an eye on how the health of each one of these aspects of your community is developing. So though we've explored a lot of different examples and questions to help to guide your thinking around this, by the end of this week, you should have a short list of the key metrics that correspond to the quality of life that you're hoping to achieve through your farm business. In the next step, we're going to use these metrics that you've come up with as the foundation to build your farm management strategy and create experiments to prove or disprove the efficacy of your management.